that military intervention, starting out as limited, can quickly escalate, risking a sequence of events far larger and more terrible, and risk even dragging us into war. It is for this reason, according to reports in The Times, that Foreign Office officials were, and I quote, incredibly nervous about last week's military assault in Yemen. Driving the region's instability is Israel's horrifying assault on Gaza, which has now lasted more than 100 days. So rather than giving Israel the green light to continue its brutal bombardment of Gaza and risking a wider conflict, will the Prime Minister seek to de-escalate the situation and call for an immediate ceasefire?
Prime Minister.
Perhaps the Honourable Lady would do well to call on Hamas and the Houthis to de-escalate the situation.
The Foreign Secretary said yesterday that the purpose of the airstrikes in Yemen was to send a message. But the message that we intend to send isn't necessarily the message that gets received. And the message seems to have been sent to many in the region that the UK is intervening in the war very clearly on the side of Israel. So what plans does the government have to manage and contain the escalation that is likely to ensue? Because simply proclaiming that this activity was intended to be limited, not escalatory, does not make it so.
And that's why we took this action as a last resort after extensive attempts at diplomacy, including a UN Security Council resolution. And again, the Honourable Lady could help, because this Parliament can speak with one voice so that the outside world and our allies in the region know that this does have nothing to do with Israel and Gaza and has everything to do with our self-defence.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Prime Minister this? In that region, there are 17 million people living in hunger and food shortage. We've had years of bombardment of the people of Yemen by weapons supplied by Britain from Saudi Arabia. And we have this dreadful conflict going on in Gaza where there are 30,000 people dead or missing. Where is the comprehensive plan by the Western nations to try to bring about a comprehensive peace across the whole region, rather than pumping more and more weapons and money in to more and more conflicts, which will get worse? Does he have any hope for the future that there will be a lessening of conflict rather than the present very rapid increase in it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do have hope, and that's because as we and others take action to degrade and disrupt the capability of those who are malign actors in the region, that will actually give the space for positive voices to build the peace that all of us want to see and to allow everyone to live side by side with dignity and security and opportunity. The original pointed out some of the humanitarian strife that people are suffering. As I pointed out, we should be proud in this House of our record. We have committed over £1 billion of aid in Yemen since the conflict began in 2014. As I said, we are currently providing food to at least 100,000 people every month, life-saving healthcare to 400 facilities. And it's worth pointing out that Yemen is entirely reliant for food on imports largely by sea. And the Houthis' attacks are actually serving to prolong the humanitarian suffering that Yemeni people are seeing. It's disrupting the very supply of the food that both he and I and everyone in this House would want to see delivered to those people.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Speaker. The right of innocent passage is a fundamental principle of international law, and it cannot be interrupted by non-state actors. And although he may wish it wasn't the case, international law isn't a menu. It comes as a package, and we cannot pick and choose what bits we want to uphold and what bits we want to ignore. So the Prime Minister unable to see how ignoring Israel's egregious breaches in Gaza, while purporting to act in defence of it in Yemen, actually undermines international law and the rules-based order.
No, Mr. Speaker. Israel has the right to act in self-defence against Hamas, which conducted a terrorist attack on them, and we continue to call for international humanitarian law to be respected and for civilians to be protected in that conflict.
John McDonnell.
I appreciate why the Prime Minister's not trying to link this to Gaza, but the reality is the longer the Gaza war goes on, the greater the instability in the Middle East will take place. It's nearly 100 days since he gave his first statement after the terrible, horrendous actions by Hamas. And he justified the actions this week with regard to protection of maritime rights. In that 100 days, 7,000 Palestinian children have been killed. What effective action is he taking to protect the right to life of Palestinian children And what effective action is he taking to prevent what is in reality the indiscriminate killing of Palestinian children by the Israeli Defence Force?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I said, we are deeply concerned about the devastating impact of the fighting in Gaza on the civilian population. Too many people have lost their lives already, and that is why we continue to call for international humanitarian law to be respected and for civilians to be protected. It's something that I continually raise with Prime Minister Netanyahu when I speak to him, and it is why we're doing absolutely everything we can to get more aid into Gaza to help those children and everyone else affected by what is happening.